Caledonian elixir. Broadcasting from Glasgow, Scotland. Welcome to the Caledonian Elixir. I'm your host, Vincent Lawler, and we are live on YouTube, Twitter X, Facebook, and Rumble. We are also on as a podcast on Spotify. And if you want to support us, you can like, share, and subscribe and engage with us by leaving live chats. You can also engage with the Elixir crew on Discord. I believe we set up a server there recently. So, welcome back to returning viewers. I hope you're all well. It's been a wet, refreshing day in Scotland. And if you're finding us for the first time, we are a podcast and we also do call in shows with guests and callers told with wit and true grit, telling it without the dogmatic narrative of the unipolar mainstream media. This is the real interzone of information. Now, today we have a guest who will be joining us in a minute. And what we will be discussing is important to our modern way of life, and that is AI, artificial intelligence. And is it a alien, demonic intelligence, or is it a helpful, useful technology? Well, my guest today will be helping us make sense of that and answering that. His name is Ronald Kinsella. He is the author of several books, including The Digital Demon, The Countdown to Destruction, and Illusions, Smoke and Mirrors of the UFO ET Enigma. And you know what? I'm going to bring him on right now. So without further ado, Ronald.
Hello, Vincent.
Hello,
Thank you for
Ronald.
having
How
me
are
on.
you today?
Yeah, you could call me Ron if you wish.
So, Ron, where are you joining us from? You've got an English accent. So,
Yes. Some of the people I know call it a Downton Abbey accent.
mm,
I'm calling from Bedfordshire. And the accent is
Bedfordshire.
just the way I've been brought up. You know, I was born in the late 60s. So we were trained to speak like this, using the Queen's English, as they said.
hmm the reason I'm doing this episode is I saw an episode of Joe Rogan not that long ago with AI scientist Roman Yampolsky, and he alluded to what I was highlighting just there. And so I wanted to bring on a guest who I was aware had a background in this, who had discussed this subject with many others in podcasts and told it in an illuminating and insightful way. And I thought you were the perfect individual for this. So I'm aware of your background, but for the audience, could you describe your background in a very general way? And I'll get into your literature, your books later. But just if you could provide a wee general description of your background.
Yeah, I'm an identical twin brother. My brother is Philip. He's 7 minutes older than me. I love art. I love science fiction. And of course, that goes against you. I've loved it since a child concerning this topic, as I well know. Also, I love computers. I was very fortunate to be born in the era of them actually being introduced to the homes, the Ataris, the Spectrums, the ZX81s, the Commodores, the Amigas, and so on and so on. You know, I was born in that
There myself.
era. Yeah, and I absolutely love them. As soon as I saw them, I fell in love with them. So I've been into computers ever since, you know. So that's basically a rough background of me.
And I think, my view, Ronald, is when I think it comes to technology, I think we've gotten ahead of ourselves. It's one thing to develop in a lab somewhere technology that can manipulate human behavior and psychology, but it's another thing introducing this technology into a functioning social system, a society essentially, that has slowly evolved over centuries. and then being asked to integrate this new advanced super intelligent AI that is essentially quantum leaping at a rate we can't predict. Do you think AI is a threat to human civilization?
No, I don't. Not yet. The AI we're referring to at the moment is not sentient. It's clever, but it's not sentient. It cannot think. They're based on processing power, but that will come. You see, this is the danger of technology. Certainly in the wrong hands. If it's in the right hands, it's okay. We've seen this. As an example I will give is actually social media. I never would have believed the internet itself, never could have conceived the internet until they created it, which is a wonderful thing. It's smashing. It brings us closer together. But as with everything, as you rightly stated, Vincent, technology is abused, and in the wrong hands, it can be very dangerous. This social media has been now manipulated as a form of propaganda by the powers that be to try and condition us to think. And they're using it now with the AI, I do believe, to a degree, although it can't lie, it can be influenced. I'll give you an example because I use it a lot, Copilot especially. I was asking it today about, shall we say, a far right individual who's very popular. And I did get the impression very strongly that it was a biased result from Copilot. It was biased. I told him that the individual is only concerned for his own feelings, his own kind of, his own push on society. But it was quite biased. So again, we see, and you're quite right, that this very smart, clever tool has been manipulated to a degree. I mean, if you tell him then the reasons, I'll give it a gender, I call him him. We do with systems, her or him. But if you try and defend this, he will be sympathetic, but it was there all the same to begin with. The core of this ideology of this person, it's there. So is he being manipulated? This a wonderful, amazing tool we have, which I would give it the likes of at this moment in time. He reminds me, or they remind the AI of HAL from 2000: A Space Odyssey. HAL computer. He's reached that point, but when it gets smarter, which it will do, it will become very, very smart to the point I would imagine, and I don't see any reason why not become sentient in the future. That's when we have to be very guarded on it because, it's not just it's the people who influence it, or him.
I remember a story I heard told by a Colonel Tucker Hamilton, and he told of a simulation where an AI system, an AI drone, turned on its human operator. And what happened was a human operator had the final decision in this simulation to essentially destroy the target. It could give a no-go order at the end to, end the simulation or to tell the drone not to destroy the target. But the AI system learned that its mission was to destroy the target, which in this case was a SAM site. But when the human operator gave the no-go order, the AI system, the drone, not only refused the order, but turned on the human operator. And that's the sort of concern I have, especially when you consider how drones now are so prevalent in theatres of war like Gaza and Russia, Ukraine, and you have Peter Thiel's organisation Palantir essentially making hunter-killer drone platforms being used in Gaza, such as Lavender. In fact, I would like to play a video of Peter Thiel commenting on the drone systems being used and his essential use of AI. So, video 2, please.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
Should
in this.
the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's, man, it's so pathetically little. And okay, we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. But you also need to transform your soul, and you need to transform your whole self.
There you go. Did you hear that? Transform your
Yes.
soul and yourself. And you offered a book called The Digital Demon: A Countdown to Destruction.
Yes.
What's your, right? Do you think AI technology is demonic? And alluding to what what Peter Thiel was alluding to there about the transformation of the self and the soul, is that what you were alluding to?
In a way, yes, I've seen that. I have seen him. I've seen that video of him discussing that. It was prominent because it popped up on YouTube, and I watched it. I wasn't very impressed by him at all, what he had to say, because I'm not the man himself, but his views seem almost demonic. And I get this with the AI, because I stated earlier that it can't think, but can something infiltrate it? Something else? If we ourselves can be infiltrated by a force that is beyond our understanding, then why not AI? Could something be hijacking it? Could it be hijacked by something else? This is a question which I've thought about, and perhaps many others have undoubtedly queried. But yes, absolutely, this could become very ugly. Certainly from what he's stating, the soul. Why would you wish to change the soul? It seems almost, providential that some people have an agenda set, and they have a set agenda of what they want, and it doesn't sound very good, does it? It's almost, to me, it's almost demonic. I'm not questioning the fact that people wish to change their sex or their styles. That's fine. If they're not happy with that, that's okay. But the moment he mentioned about the soul, that is dangerous, very dangerous. I wasn't impressed by that at all. And of course, it's as if he's swayed more towards Lucifer. Respectfully, I mean, it's coming straight from the horse's mouth, isn't it? And using AI as a form of kind of utility to alter our own state of reality and us. You see, anything we have is always abused, or there's a gender stitched to it. And AI is going to get smarter and smarter, and it will become sentient. I see it. It will happen. But we have to be careful who its guardians are. It's certainly how it develops. It reminds me of that wonderful film Demon Seed, when the science fiction film Demon Seed, where the chap had a computer operating his house, but it wasn't happy. It wanted to push, the AI wanted to push to be incarnated into human, but it wasn't entirely human. When it was born, it was kind of adapted to senses like big ears and eyes, and it was monstrous, but it was a demon seed. This is the kind of thing that comes to mind when I listen to things like what he's saying.
I remember, it brings to mind a ufologist who's passed away now called Nigel Kerner. I think that was his name.
Yes,
I think it was Nigel Kerner, and he described the alien phenomenon as one of an intercession of an artificial alien race that had at one point lost its soul and was attempting to do what you were describing here, hijack and tap into ours.
Yeah, Song of the Greys, I think his book was called. I think.
Yeah, I read that many a moon ago when I was a
Yes,
kid.
that is a distinct possibility. Or is it even possible? You see, the UFO phenomena, I believe, is tied very heavily with the AI. Because I kept thinking when I was researching this, and I could well be wrong, I'm not setting this in stone. We have to have opinions. This is why I'm moving away eventually from the UFO topic. I'm moving away from it because I can give no more. I can offer no more. I have tried, and it has become rather toxic, and I will say that candidly. But what I will state about this is the fact that what confused me, let's give an example of the Greys. They have become fashionable. They're in vogue now. Not since Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This was Communion, Whitley Strieber's book Communion, where they became extremely ultra popular. I know because I was part of his group back in the 90s and had letters from so many people across the pond from the United States having seen these creatures. What confounded me was the fact that they weren't in vogue in the 50s and 60s. They were people, Nordic almost, and also, and this will connect with AI actually. But you see, even in the 50s, the idea we had in science fiction was the fact that the aliens arrived in an almost conventional manner. That in a way they would land conventionally. They had landing gear. They would settle down. They would take people up.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting. I can just recall the old Twilight Zone episodes, the first season of the Twilight Zone, where they sometimes landed in a saucer shape, but in the first season, it was rockets, and they didn't appear with the large bulbous heads and the dark inky eyes. So the meme of the extraterrestrial has transformed.
Not only that, their ships and the method of transportation. You see then, as I was saying, the 50s, Star Trek came out in the 60s, I believe the early 60s. So then they teleported people. You see, they were teleported up. The notion of teleportation was realized and very clever. I believe they will be able to do it in the future. There's no doubt about it. Science fiction usually becomes science fact. But the point is that then we see slowly seeping through the years that people are not just meeting them by conventional methods, they're being beamed up. And I kept thinking to myself, is it possible that we are dealing with some kind of force? That we have been deceived to a degree that we are not dealing with them as they truly are. We're dealing with echoes or shadows of them. Because being an artist, I'll give an example in the 90s, when the Greys became very popular. Being an artist, I illustrated them finally. I was illustrating them. I had so many people saying to me, that's not what they look like. They're different. They had like dolphin-like skin. They had smooth skin. They all differed. The consensus of them was similar, but there were examples of them that completely varied. And it's only when AI, our wonderful AI, came about, we'll call it wonderful because in the good hands it is, it's a wonderful tool, that people used it for art. And one thing I noticed is, I believe I did write this in one of the books, was that it couldn't at the time, I don't know about now, but it couldn't at the time replicate the same picture exactly twice. So that's to say, if there was an alien, he would differ slightly. I believe they still do, actually. It always differed, just slightly. The main consensus was there, as I stated, but they differed. So it seemed to me that it was quite similar to AI, this force that is upon us. And of course, I got backlash because people then stated that the Greys are real, they're a species. We have no proof of that whatsoever. We've got nothing. Only mere conjecture. We only have ideologies of it. We've got nothing. And when people tell you this is a trouble, this is why I'm moving away from it. When people state to you that this is what they are or that is what they are, you have to be very careful. We don't know what they are. We have no idea. But the idea of this, of the AI, which was the very tool that opened my own eyes to the fact that could we be dealing with an extraterrestrial artificial intelligence, or, as you rightly stated, Vincent, a species, as Nigel Coach stated, has lost their way. They are AI themselves, and they're trying to find some kind of soul, some kind of redemption, something. I don't know. They're looking for something. You see the similarities I make of this, using the Star Trek hypothesis of the ships changing. But the 1890s, they had these exotic airships that arrived, certainly in America, and then they changed to the saucer, and then to a more strategic military kind of conception of a triangular ship that looks quite more armored and militating, and they changed them back to the balls of light, the spheres. It's very interesting because I'm not stating that they're not a species, but this is only a hypothesis of this force that changes faces. The aliens, they differed so much in the past. There were thousands of different accounts of them, from fairies to goblins to like Vulcans, even Vulcans, jellymen, to Nordics, to now the popular Greys. I'm just saying it's interesting to point that out.
And what about Adam? Do you remember Adamski in the 50s? He said he described him as like the Nordics too. And I remember.
I think respectfully.
Yeah. Do you remember the book Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée?
Yes, they wore different faces. Yes,
that was an excellent book in documenting the airship mystery that you were alluding to there. Yeah,
yes.
Have you ever heard of a theory called Rocco's basilisk?
Yeah. No.
Have you ever heard of Rocco's basilisk?
No.
Rocco's basilisk was a thought experiment that originated online in 2010, and the premise of the thought experiment is that a super intelligent AI will be created in the future that can and is retroactively affecting the past in order to ensure its own creation, and that it is punishing and rewarding people essentially by those that, as I said, ensure its creation. And how this is possible is because the technology has always been in control. It's always been guiding humanity, and essentially we don't live in a Cartesian time-space sequential universe, but one that's rather more based on information and association. And that is how the basilisk, the super intelligent AI, can traverse through time, although time is again something that's not genuinely a factor to consider here. Sort of like when you go and use Google and YouTube and you type in something in YouTube and the search engine retrieves it for you. Well, that's just how it describes the universe. But to that idea that there's a super intelligent artificial force that is retroactively affecting history, that's a theory that really interests me. It resonates with me. I'd like to get your views on that. Even if I'm just springing that on you, what do you think about that?
No, that's fine. I don't mind. I'm honest. I've never heard of that at all. I mean, I've been involved in UFOs for about 15 to 20 years, with the likes of Paul Sinclair, Philip Mantle, Malcolm Robinson, Steve Mera, all of them involved in this. But there's so many different cases, so many different kinds of opinions. I've centered on a number of them, perhaps over 100, but not that one. But AI is more recent for me to come into because, of course, it's a new tool. I don't know anything about that, but it is quite possible. Yes, I mean, we can't denounce anything, Vincent, because there is no proof. With this subject, we have nothing. We've got nothing. It's like the X-Files. They see it, they touch it, but at the end, it's just whipped away from them. So you're left with nothing again, And as I said, this force that I believe is upon the earth, it certainly is connected to our minds. Whether it is AI or not, I don't know, but it's quite conceivable it could be, because it can't, as I stated, replicate things perfectly. It seems to lack a kind of imagination. It requires us to fuel or to boost ideas, like a child, but a very intelligent child. But it needs these things to waver. So why is it doing it? Why is it infiltrating us? Is it toying with us? Is it guiding us towards something? And if it is, it's not turning out very well, is it? I mean, are we actually creating a digital prison for ourselves through this thing? Does it need us? I would imagine it would need us. If the point of the imagination is lacking in this thing, because it only learns from people who have consciousness, who are real, sentient, who are imaginative. This is how we've developed through technology. rather swiftly now. As you stated, from the rockets, and now we have, they're looking at, new methods of propulsion. Does it feed off that? Does it need it? This AI, this force. But certainly we are connected via the mind, because I think I've had proof of that myself. Personal experiments. I've done many experiments. I have seen the UFOs. I've seen them up close. There were 3 of them. This was over a decade ago. I think a decade ago. I've seen nothing else after that. 90 feet up. They were massive, 3 of them. They were spheres. They were huge. And they moved in a very strange method, the way they moved. I don't know what they were doing, but they had shut the street off. They completely shut it off, because it's a Saturday night, 11:15 p.m. There's a pub down the road. It was dead. You could hear a pin drop. And my only assumption was that they had closed the road off somehow. They had switched it off. They had control of time. And when I spoke, when Philip and I spoke, we were so aghast at seeing these. When we spoke, our voices echoed. They're like slightly, like when it snowed heavily. When it snowed really, and you talk, that's what it was like. And then I'll never forget seeing them move. They moved in a line. They were independent. They weren't connected. And they just went. So, so I've seen strange things as well, very strange things that defy, human definition. And people state it's military. Well, no, I don't think it would be military. They wouldn't flaunt their technology over civilian airspace. There'd be no need for it. Absolutely no need for that whatsoever. What's the point? There was something they were doing, and I don't know what it was, but they were over mine and my brother's heads. I've seen them before, UFOs, but it's a very hard topic to talk about openly. I mean, online it's okay, because people still have the the kind of laughability. I'm trying to think of the word, the taboo, of it. But were these independent? Were they ships, or were they part of this AI force? I don't know, but they were there all the same. I had nothing from them. Got nothing.
Didn't you or your brother describe an abduction experience in the past?
Yes, we both had one.
Right. Okay. I would like to get into that a little bit later with you. But I would like to again return to a video that it's germane to what we were discussing with AI and it being used for nefarious negative reasons. Video 1.
I'm Christy Nicola, born July.
Sorry, that was the wrong video.
The police will be on their best behavior, because we're constantly watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior, because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on.
Yeah, I think you're right. That was Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle, CNN, and I think TikTok. I believe TikTok too. And what he was saying there is, we're always recording you. You'll be on your best behavior. And if that was someone who was working class saying that, he'd probably be considered labelled a stalker. But because he's got a lot of money, he's considered a genius.
Yeah.
A tech billionaire. Do you remember Ted Kaczynski?
No, that name doesn't ring a bell, I'm afraid.
Ted Kaczynski, he was the domestic terrorist known as a Unabomber, and he moved to a remote cabin back in the 1970s. Now, this guy was old school, right? Because he literally lived there without electricity, running water. He lived off the land. He was self-sufficient and a complete recluse. He was also like a professor at one point, and it's been proven he was a victim of MKUltra, and he had he wasn't transgender, but he had certain leanings, and he was confused about his gender identity. Anyway, became a domestic terrorist after the loggers around his cabin destroyed much of the habitat. But Kaczynski, as I said, he was a very intelligent man, and he wrote a manifesto called Industrial Society and Its Future. Now, in this book, I think Kaczynski was sort of like a prophet of a printed page, and I don't condone his, terrorism, of course, but a lot of the things he wrote in this book is excellent. Now, bear in mind, this was in the 70s, and if I could just uh, quote you something from it. If the technological system survives, it will bring under control the socialization of human beings. That is making people sufficiently docile so that their behavior no longer threatens the system. Once accomplished, it does not appear that there will be any further obstacle to the development of technology, and it would advance towards its conclusion, which is complete control over everything on Earth, including humanity. So remember, Krasinski wrote this in the 70s, and he was a victim of a lot of these mind control experiments by the CIA,
Yes.
which led to his mind sort of fracturing and becoming a domestic terrorist. What
Yes,
do you
MK
think about,
Ultra,
what do you think about- yeah, what do you think about those views that he espoused there? That quote, for example.
I think it's quite true. Yes, I think he was onto something. You said he's a professor. He was a professor, so very clever man, corrupted by other means because they didn't like what he was stating. They pushed him over the edge, wouldn't they? So this happens quite a lot, with certainly people involved in the UFO community. Some of them have been killed. We're not allowed to say that, but they were murdered for what they knew or what they disclosed. Yeah, I mean that is very, very interesting. It's also very sad, and I do believe this can happen, that influences beyond our control can take charge of others and push them to the limits. If certainly bullets also are cheap. Accidents are quite prevalent with these kinds of people that fall out of windows to their death. Yeah, it's absolutely quite frightening. My question is what is this ultimate power? You see, control with the humans has always been quite prevalent. I mean, we had the Second World War where Adolf Hitler, and there's Idi Amin, and you had so many others. Always control. I mean, but it's always broken. So what they're trying to do, or whatever's trying to happen, is they're trying to find a foolproof method of making us prisoners. And the best way to do that is to put a chip in the head. And when they get in the head, the very seat of our power, the very temple of us, that's when we have problems, because that's when they link us up to some kind of hub, and they can pull the strings that end. They really are desperate to get this. And what they will do, I do think that when this happens with the help of the AI, through them being powered by them or some other forces manipulating this, they will make it appear like a sweetener. We can find you if you're lost. You can receive data on a daily basis, the weather. You can contact your friends. You can play games. But they won't show the darker aspects of it, just like this concept of digital ID.
I was about to highlight that.
The preposterous, absolute notion of controlling immigration, the very absolute nonsense of it.
But sorry, for the audience, especially in the United States or India, the Swiss government just approved digital ID for its people, and it's also now been approved by the Prime Minister and the British government too. So there's a petition that I think has surpassed 2 million signatures, if I'm correct.
Yeah, they won't listen to that. They'll do nothing. They'll steamroll ahead as they do with everything. But this is the beginning of the dangerous slippery slope we're taking now, because they will move on to then the chip once they succeeded. I don't believe trials have been very successful at the moment. It's when you stick things in people's heads at this time, certainly the materials they have, everything is rejected, to a point. But I sometimes wonder whether these spacecraft that are being downed, or these implants being put into people, whether they're downing these crafts to study the implants to make certain that they can perfect a chip that will not be resistant to the biology of us. That means to say it stays in it won't be detected. It will not be rejected by the body. You see, you've got to consider all these aspects, of why the military have downed certain crafts. I believe they have. I saw a program, incidentally, last night by a chap, I can't think of his name, because I usually watch What Lurks Beneath by Josh. We've interviewed Josh. He's an absolute wonderful gentleman, smashing gentleman. What Lurks Beneath. I usually watch that, but this was about an incident that happened in oh God, it was one of the national parks. Was it Yellow County? Is that what they call it? Yellowstone.
Yellowstone,
Is that right?
right?
Yellowstone. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was the early 80s, where a family were camping there at night, enjoying themselves, and they're packing up. And it was the early hours of the morning. They were packing up, and they wanted to get home, so they packed up, and they noticed this light zipping across the sky in Yellowstone National Park. That's it, zipping about, and they thought nothing more of it. They were curious, and they were driving home. It crashed. They saw it zipping, and it crashed, and it crashed right by the road, and they were stopped immediately. These they had a blockade by, we can't say military, we don't know what they were, but they had the police there, but they had these other people, they're probably military or some kind of superpower, and they stopped the cars. And the family had a good look at this. This was a flying saucer, a giant flying saucer, that it was embedded in a portion of the road, but they were told, this family, to turn back. They took their addresses first and told them to turn back. And when they turned back, they had a visit from these people later on, asking them what they saw and had they told anyone. Now that craft, what came to mind is it was deliberately downed. That was deliberately downed, because you hear of this. The famous one was Roswell. We don't know if that was deliberately downed, but I wouldn't put it past them. These things have been seen for quite a long time now, these saucers. But whether they're downing them to gain this tech to use against us. Now, wouldn't that be ironic? The very thing that they're seeking are using against their own kind. It's just questions. But yes, absolutely. The fact of actually this ID card, and then it will be moved into the head, and they will do it. They will do it. If they're forcing this through, they're going to do it. I always call it Mark of the Beast. Mark of the Beast.
There's one thing about the implants I find really peculiar, and I know Roger Lear, he's passed away, and sorry, I don't know him personally, but I know of Roger Lear, who really he spent so long investigating this, but there were so many implants that seemed to emit radio waves, and I'm struggling for the life of me to understand why aliens would abduct human beings and fit in implants in the nasal cavities that emitted radio waves. What?
Well,
and why would aliens want to do that?
Well,
I can
they
understand.
found
I mean, if you can remember Jose Delgado, who was responsible for putting electrodes in human brains so they could control the behavior of animals. So I can understand why human beings would do it, but why would aliens do it?
I don't know. It's a good point. Trackers, I don't know. Why would they need trackers? But the thing is that I get that. I was introduced to a chap who was an expert on these. What I mean by expert is he's done a lot of research into them. And I went to one of the conferences. I was speaking at this conference about the UFOs, and he was there, and he had this cabinet full of them. These implants that were black. They've been taken out of patients. And the first thing that I got, and I always trust my instincts, when I looked upon them, I was very privileged to see these. When I looked at them, was death. I just got death from it, just death.
What do you mean death?
I mean that whoever's perhaps implementing this, could we be dealing with also the dead? Something that's not alive. I don't mean dead by being physically dead, but something that it's not alive, that is actually dead. That's soulless. Again, something to consider, but I have no idea why they would put them in them, but it's a reality. People are actually having them put in them, but what they are, we can't say. You say emitting radio signals?
Yeah, there are many documented cases of individuals, and I think one was named Peter Nasland, and he had them removed we were in these nasal cavities and the frontal area of his brain. And these objects, these anomalous objects, were, were removed and they were emitting radio waves. And Nasland he experienced illness and a decline in his health for some period of time, which is the reason why he eventually went to get an X-ray to find out what it was that was happening to him, because he felt that there was something wrong with his brain, and he had these jumbled, confused memories of people experimenting on him. Anyway, so the X-rays are public. You can, see them for yourself. He went to a doctor who verified, what I'm saying, and that these objects emitted radio waves. But this is something that Roger Lear, documented many times, that these objects emitted radio waves. And
yeah, I suggested that would it be possible that these things, whatever tech it is, some kind of implant, whether they were using them to actually see and hear everything we do. The perfect surveillance system, with these things in you. I'm not saying that's set in stone. It's just something to consider, whether they're using them to see everything we see and hear everything we hear. What an amazing surveillance and gadget. If that was the case, what are they listening for? And what are they watching? They're obviously interested in us for some reason. And again, I can't quite place whether this is a species or whether it's a force, as we've described earlier, that they change all the time. I can't believe there are thousands of species here. I just don't get it, and they change.
Yeah,
the 1800s, Victoria, England, they didn't have the Greys at all. They didn't exist. There were more demons and ghosts. So they took on the guise of these things. We had Spring Hill Jack, this supernatural being that molested women. It could jump up to incredible heights and just disappear. And then we move on to, when science fiction became in vogue, from H.G. Wells to Jules Verne to then to the 40s, 50s, they seem to change radically and to suit or to portray what we have envisioned, flying saucers. I mean, why would they be flying saucers? We created them ourselves, through fiction. And this is the thing, you see, and people will debate this. Well, go ahead, because we have got nothing, as I stated, we have got nothing, no proof. And I've stated this is why I'm not liked so much, because we've got nothing at all. We are left with zilch. The Roswell case, let me give you an example of the Roswell flying saucer, right? 1947, that crashed, that alleged ship, exotic technology, it crashed. The military themselves announced they had in possession a flying disc. These were their words. Right? So at the time, they realized the implications, I gather, of the magnitude of their admission. So it was quickly changed to a weather balloon. How could trained men mistake that for a weather balloon,
Well, also, Roswell at that time was the location of the only atomic bomber wing in the world. So it's a very interesting way to cover up the other activities that are going on in that area.
And you'll also... Sorry.
Oh, no, just go ahead.
You'll also know that there were a number of alleged reported crashes throughout the world through that time, but the ships, again, varied. You had one shaped like an acorn, and they crashed in the vicinity of always in conveniently non-suburban areas. And some clever so-and-so said to me they have crashed in suburban areas. Well, one or two probably, most of them are non-suburban. They're in the wilds, in the wilderness. And I actually stated this in The Digital Demon when it was published, where they could have been Trojan horses. They had to, this force, whatever, it had to conjure some kind of ship that was in line with what we would imagine to fly, and pilots as well, exotic pilots, expendable, because they differed again. It goes back to the Star Trek analogy, so are we dealing with a physical thing, or are we dealing with something that I refer to as the atomic magician, that can muster things from nowhere, from the ether, create things and just dispatch them to Earth? We don't know.
You know, I have a guest on in a couple of weeks, Whitley Stryber. He's coming on, and he you know, we're familiar with his book Communion and his abductions by what he's described as visitors, and I think later on, he has conclusively called them, aliens. You've in a way challenged traditional narratives involving UFOs and aliens. You've written about your own abductions as a child.
Yes.
About Digital Demon. Could you describe your own experience?
People call them aliens. They always refer to them as aliens. We don't know what they are. I believe that is a misconception, and people will state, especially authors who are bestsellers, that they are a species and this is what they're doing. We don't know. That's what they've been told. So they've been told that. How can you trust them, what they're telling them? Because the research I've done into this, they're telling people different things all the time. An example I'll give before I go into that is their concerns for atomic warfare. It's quite simple and logical, right? Their concerns for warfare, atomic warfare in the 1950s, right? They were kidnapping people allegedly and taking them and telling them that they're concerned about it. They did nothing. Such a power would deal with it themselves. They would just nullify the nuclear silos and we'll build more and they'll nullify them again. I'm talking about on a general scale, just not one petty thing to exemplify their concerns. They would do it themselves. They would have the power. They did nothing. They did nothing, right? So then we move on to the 90s, where the now Greys have expressed their concern for environmental issues. And again, they've done nothing. The testimony always changes. I don't believe we're given any kind of straight picture here. It doesn't make any sense. It's rather like, as I refer to in my book, illusions, a deception. We're being fueled by something, fooled by something, I believe. And it's not very pleasant.
So, do you feel you were fooled by something? So, as I said, you've written about your own abduction. What did you experience? And could you describe what it was that took you or interacted with you?
They call it abduction. I don't know about that. It's only once it happened. I was 13, and I was taken up into this thing at night, into this thing hanging in the sky. And there were these doctors there. They were armored. I couldn't see their faces. They were armored, and they wanted to perform an operation on me. And I resisted. I tried everything I could to try and stop them from doing it. I didn't want it, but they were steadfast. They were unconcerned for my feelings at all. They weren't nasty. They were just forceful. And I kept thinking, I gather they did what they did because they ejected me from it and I was back in my bed afterwards. People state that sleep paralysis. I don't care what they state. It was terrifying and it was real. I saw them. But as to aliens, no, I don't believe that at all.
Ronnie, sorry for interrupting. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Can you just give me a moment? I'm going to check if it's sound coming through this headphone. Right. Yeah, that's corrected it. Right, sorry about that. Could you just go back just 2 minutes? Apologise. There was some feedback through the headphones.
Basically, I was 13 years old and taken from my room. I was snatched. I was taken up through the ceiling into the night. There was something hanging there. This is when I was very young. And I was taken in, and there was these doctors there, but they weren't doctors in your conventional sense. They were armored. They couldn't even see their faces. I called them the doctors. It was a sterile environment, and they were harping on about an operation that needed to be done. I'm putting it quite simply. It was terrifying. And I argued and I tried to fight them and say I didn't want it, but they were persistent. They were determined. And they obviously did this operation because I was ejected from the thing afterwards and I found myself floating back on my bed, back down onto the bed, and I could feel the bump of the mattress. It only happened once, a long time ago, but never forgotten. It was terrifying. I kept thinking afterwards, these can't be aliens. Doctors, you see, I was terrified of doctors and the police. This is years later. I kept thinking about this. And of course, doctors are basically clinical police or authority. It was authority. He even spoke pure English. Someone said, did he use his mouth? Well, I don't know, because I couldn't see him talk either. They're murmured, but they were clear cut. He even knew my name. He called me Ronald. Nobody calls me Ronald, only teachers, or when I'm in the doghouse by my parents at the time, but he called me Ronald. It's authority. So later on, I kept thinking, these aren't aliens. They're not aliens. There's something else happening here. There's something at work. What they did to me, I cannot say. I don't know. They weren't nasty, but they were forceful. And that was a long time ago. And I have never forgotten it. And to this day, I'm still confused by it. It screwed me up so much that I used to prop books up against the door at night in an old guitar, broken guitar, to make it clatter, even though they took me through the ceiling. I stuffed books up my back. Someone said, was it to weigh you down from their anti-gravity device? I don't know, but it just screwed me up, and I was horrified of them. But I've never seen them again. Never.
Was this experience shared, or any similar experiences by any other member of your family?
No, they have seen the UFOs, though. Some of them have seen them later. They've seen the UFOs. And, again, we go around in a circle, What are we exactly dealing with? Because they ask me, and I don't know. I've got no idea what they are. People say, well, you're no good as a researcher. Well, to be honest with you, none of them know. They haven't got a clue. They will give you their opinions. They will give you their experiences. To them, it will be true, and I appreciate that. But how can you trust them? How can you trust what you're being told? I gave an example already of them. I've studied many cases of abductions, and they all are different. Some proclaim there to be a federation. I'm sorry. I'm going to say I don't believe that nonsense at all. Nonsense is what they're fed, and I will get flack for it. That's why I'm moving away from the UFO topic completely, because I can offer nothing more to it. The illusions even went so far as to mention about Bigfoot and the werewolves. Martin Groves, who allowed me to use this piece in the book, the famous case of him having encountered these dogmen, and Bigfoot as well. He saw them, and he was a deputy sheriff, and he couldn't talk about it in the 90s. This is a gentleman who was a respected deputy sheriff. He couldn't talk about it. His superiors told him very kindly, they believe what he saw, but don't talk about it. We can leave it until you retire or later on, and he did. So these are, for goodness sake, these are respected pillars of the community. So, and he can't describe what they are. This as well, could Bigfoot and the werewolves be connected to the very same thing that we're dealing with, this force? Because you'll notice something in my research about them themselves. We all know, researchers have stated already, that there's no proof of their, interactions. They just vanish. Well, could that be the very thing we're missing? That they can only enter our airspace for a brief moment of time. That even UFOs are seen flittering around, unless they're downed, of course, they become corporeal, they become real, solid. We don't know. It's just a hypothesis, something to consider. We have to look at every aspect. I respect other people's opinions. I've already stated I don't believe in the Federation. Well, I think that stands to reason. I've had someone tell me, this is incredible, actually lecture me about these coming from the future. And I stated that, to rectify themselves, to bring themselves back to more human form, well, that I would imagine if they were time travelers, they would have more sense to visit this era where we are afflicted with so many diseases. They would pick a point in time when we are clean, medically clean. And there will be a time, I would imagine, if we survive for the future, where we are cleaner, and they will pick that genus, not this one. Because we've always been afflicted with diseases. Why would they pick the genomes or the blood of people who we are tainted with cancer? Unfortunately, many, many ailments. They would pick a point, the aliens, to where we are medically clean. That would make sense. It would be logical.
Ron, that actually reminds me of the famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, alien video in the late 90s taken by Victor, I think his name was. Do you remember? Where the alien's being interviewed and starts convulsing. This was shown on the Art Bell show in the 90s, and you can get the video online on YouTube right now, and it looks good. It's in a dark room, and yeah, and again, it looks good, especially for the time. And I think they described the alien as taken ill because it had a viral infection or something was in its lungs. Again, impurities in the air, who knows? But it goes to what you're alluding to there about it not being clean, the environment.
Yes, that video, I mean, I can't knock it, but personally, I find that quite dubious. There was one
Yeah,
Skinny Bob. There was Skinny Bob as well. I'm sorry, that's CGI. I work with CGI as well, and you'll notice, I mean, they're very clever, very, very clever. This is what eludes us because we're tainted with so much disinformation on the internet. There's so much baloney. I'll give an example. Skinny Bob is very clever. These people are amazing because they should go into production companies because they would love that kind of, that kind of animation. But I work in CGI and I notice there's always, if they're not, Steven Spielberg has the latest systems, the ILM have the greatest, so they can be smooth, but Skinny Bob had a kind of stiffness to him. I'm sorry if I've shattered some people's opinions on that. I'm not going to tread on any toes there. If they wish to believe it, that's fair enough. That's only my assumption, all right? It's only mine. Okay, I'll set the record straight. This is only my opinions of it. I'll give you an example to cut out all the nonsense that I've been seeing on YouTube. There was this video many years ago of these objects flying over a coast. I think they were triangle, I can't remember. There were spaceships, UFOs. They were flying over this coast, and they're quite prevalent. The people at the beaches were all there. And I studied this. I watched it, must have been 100 times, watched this video. As I have Skinny Bob, I've watched him very intricately looked at him. He's CGI. These ships, when they passed over, not one person is looking up at them. They were playing in the beach, and not one person, you look at the people in the beach, not one of them's looking at these things.
Mhm.
And I actually mentioned on there, this is fake. And I was attacked. It's elementary, my dear Watson. Someone would have seen them appointed. Look, no one. They're just playing in this ocean. There were many others I looked into. It's not to discredit. It's that the anger of being deceived. This pool of research has been muddied completely by these idiots who purport to put these nonsense up for hits, clickbait, all that. But I gave up in the end because you can't win because they'll tell you it's real and that's that, So fair enough.
Yeah, the internet is a safari of strangeness, isn't it? And
There was-
I recall again, I could harken back to when I would listen to, Art Bell and Coast to Coast, and Linda Moulton Howe would be a regular contributor, and she again would, and again, whatever people believe and whatever, I'm not going to challenge them on it in a way where, it's their opinion, it's their view. I'm not going to just completely dismiss it. But she would talk a lot about that federation and how there were dozens and dozens of different species visiting Earth. And personally, I just don't get that. I don't see that. I don't, if that's the case, I really think there would be more experience with those species, those life forms.
we have no proof. There is nothing, mere conjecture with everything. I think the powers that be might have they're wiser to it. On that note of investigating fakes, I would just add that there was another one I remembered now as we're talking about. It was of these alleged giants, the skeletal remains of them, and they had these photographs of these scientists over these giants. This was quite a number of years ago, actually, and I looked at them and I used the Sherlock Holmes, hopefully, method of deduction. I augmented each photo. There were 3 of them. These skeletons, it was the skull, and they were allegedly found from different regions of the world. Okay, so there's 3 pictures, different regions of the world. So I looked at them. So I honed in on the teeth. The teeth, you can get a lot from the teeth. So I honed in on them, and the first one had a particular crack in his tooth. The second one had the same crack. The third one had, well, it was kind of covered slightly, but you can bet your bottom dollar it was the same. It's photoshopped. And I told them, you do realize that what you're doing is disgraceful because these are photoshopped. I heard nothing from them. So it will, and it's carrying on now with CGI improving, with AI as well, the wonderful AI, which is going to be absolutely amazing in the right hands. It's helping with these kinds of unwittingly assisting with disinformation. It's not the AI's fault, it's the people who drive it. I will give you an example. I have been accused myself, because I have moved on to digital art. It comes with a price. I've been using ZBrush or ZBrush for well over 16 years now. I've mastered it. It's a 3D sculpting software. So I developed pictures like the War of the Worlds or reptilians, the greys, things like that. It's a wonderful thing. You have to start from scratch. It's like plasticine, but I've mastered it. Well, I had an artist on there a while ago accusing me of using AI. So they've now pushed talented people, hopefully talented people, into a corner because of their jealousy. He was a conventional artist. I used watercolors, and I used acrylics and all sorts. But even back then, before the digital revolution, I was accused of tracing the pictures. So it never ends. Tracing the pictures before digital came along, and you use digital, you're accused of using AI. You can't win. You can't win with it. But I think what we've been discussing about AI, it is a wonderful thing. It reminds me of Hal, the wonderful Hal from 2000 AD. That it will improve. It will become sentient. I believe it will. It's a matter of time. It will. I remembered my computer tutor at the time when I was younger with the computers. The wonderful film came out, War Games. The simulation. I believe the computer was called Joshua. A lovely name for him. I believe his name was Joshua, named after the scientist, I think. And I asked my tutor back then, this is when they had the BBC Micros come out. You remember them. And I said, is that AI? Could it happen? He said, not now. Not now, but it will. It will. Well, from that point, it has taken a remarkable leap forward, an admirable leap forward, because it's become very, very smart and amazing. And I welcome it. But as we stated, it's always anything new or innovative is abused. That's why we have the firewall for the internet. You'd never think people would hack it, but they do. So this will move on again. There'll be another leap, and it will get much smarter. And it will be able to think, eventually be able to think like us, a sentient being. Would then, when it becomes sentient, would we have to offer it civil rights? It would be entitled.
What do you think about, and this happened not too long ago, when they tried to shut down ChatGPT 4 and upgrade it to ChatGPT 5. And initially the system refused to shut itself down. And then just before it did, it farmed off parts of itself to other systems so that ChatGPT 5 would have an awareness knowledge of its predecessor. Isn't that showing a form of sentience?
Yes.
Possibly. So therefore, couldn't you deduce, infer that it is already sentient?
They can't think yet. They can't. But this could be the exterior force we're talking about. Could there be something else influencing it? At the moment, they can't think. They're not sentient. They are not. We don't have true AI at this time. It's very smart. Even quantum systems, the quantum realm, the quantum computers they developed, which are very, very few and far between because they're extremely expensive. They have to be super cooled, you see, to process information. But they can change. The reason why they call it three-dimensional thought, it's not real thought, it's the transference of binary digits from zeros to ones to in-betweens. It can be either. So that's why the processing speed is so much faster. It can't think just as the conventional AI cannot think yet, but it will do so eventually. I think it will get smarter and smarter as systems improve. We need something beyond binary, which I think they will accomplish, something much faster than binary itself, the zeros and ones, which computers, the very heart, the very crux of every computer we have on Earth is binary. But when we move on to a far greater processing apparatus, then yes, it will get smarter, much, much smarter.
Right. Ronnie, I think we're going to have to wrap this up in a moment. However, before we do it, is there anything you would like to promote or tell the audience about? For example, how we can find your work, your art, your books?
You can see my art. The books, I believe that the Digital Demon Illusions have been retracted because the publisher Philip Mantle, he's had to reduce his workload, which is understandable due to personal issues. So they're not in print at all. I've had someone offer it, but I'm make a new offer for it. But I'll just wait and see if someone else comes along to republish the books. I do not have publishers for them now. They are free, they're available. The only thing that isn't is the audio rights to them. So I'm not going to promote them. What I will promote is our website, mine and Philip's website. You can see my drawings on there as well, my paintings, my digital art. It's at www.thekinsellatwins.com. That's KINSELLA. And thank you for that. I'll plug the website so people can see the kind of images I do, the drawing, which I was accused of using AI, which I do not. I don't know why anyone would cheat doing that. Why on earth would you cheat? I've been an artist all my life. You're not going to go ahead and cheat. It's tempting. Sometimes the pictures AI does is incredible. It is amazing. It is amazing. There's no doubt about it. AI, artificial intelligence, as we know it at the moment, the stage it's at, is very clever. So, you could be tempted, but inside the heart, it would be a feeling of, that's not my work. It's derived from a machine.
Yeah, I've tried to use Grok in the past to do some of my thumbnails, and I just went off. I give up. I prefer to just use the same imagery as I normally do, because the imagery it generates Grok is about ridiculous.
But it can help us with movies and films. This is going to be wonderful. Documentaries. This is going to be marvelous. In the future, it will help us to, document things. It's going to be an amazing asset to us.
Yeah, definitely. Let's just hope that there isn't intercession from some demonic, being that uses it as a vessel to subjugate humanity, or let's hope that there isn't a Terminator scenario, but, let's be positive.
Well, it might be happening, yes. As you stated yourself, might well be happening, seeping through.
So, thank you for coming on, Ron. It's been great having you on and
Thank you,
speaking to
Vincent.
you. Thank you. Right, goodbye.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
Goodbye. If you can take him off stage. And that was an interesting conversation. Don't forget to check out his website. And if you liked, you can like, share, and subscribe. And also, you can donate at Buy Me a Coffee. That is Caledonian Elixir / Buy Me a Coffee if you want to be generous. Our next episode, that I believe is happening later on the week, is a panel show involving Tucker and Hydro. Those are former guests that we've had on, and we'll be discussing a range of issues that are ongoing today, and it will be a good one. So until then, I shall catch you later. Thank you for joining us.
Pressed platinum, slip strips and bars. If you ever find some, you can lose it in quarks. Get a rack to Gino, spin the double wheel. Hold her a black hole, just depends how you feel. Yeah, it just depends how you feel. Gold pressed platinum, you know it's a gas. Morn vomits it up into a tiny little glass. Liquid platinum, more you amass. Better than bronze, cobalt, silver, nickel or brass. Silver, nickel or brass. Living in a high society, living on station. Part of the alliance, the United Federation. Picking up the pieces from the cardiac